Mr. Cisneros, it's great to see you again. As you know, I lead the Housing Authority of Travis County, and nationally, we're celebrating Disability Pride Month. And that really is an opportunity to talk, to have conversations about persons with disabilities, their struggles, their plights, some of their accomplishments, over that period of time. And so I really wanted to center the conversation about housing for persons with disabilities. As you probably know, 1 in 4 persons living with disabilities are considered low income. And so particularly challenging is the idea of finding accessible housing, but accessible housing for low income families is even more challenging. And so just based on your experience as a leader in the industry, a former mayor, and one who's a housing advocate, what would you say is really the best approach, or what you've seen as a best practice related to addressing this need of affordable housing, particularly for persons with disabilities?
Well, one of the great breakthroughs in our society in recent years, over the last, say, 30 years, has been the actions that we've taken with respect to persons with disabilities. I remember in the 1960s and 70s, there was a man named Justin Dart, and he was an advocate and campaigner for housing for persons with disabilities and basically other accommodations in the society. For example, the work that's gone on to do curb cuts in all the major cities, and the requirements, for example, of people flying to be able to have accommodations with wheelchairs, and then helping getting seated and so forth. We've come a long way when you think of it. In previous generations, people with disabilities were simply disregarded and basically not able to participate in society because they had disabilities. Many communities, many cultures, people were basically kept at home. And so we've got a whole new world for people with disabilities, and I think the society is much better for it, because instead of losing that talent, we actually are able to harness that talent. And there's a lot of brain power and a lot of knowledge and a lot of empathy and a lot of experience in persons with disabilities. So I think it's been, as I say, a great breakthrough. I saw it up close in the housing field as Secretary of Housing, because we were working to renovate housing authority properties and others, all kinds of affordable housing, low-income housing, tax credit housing, et cetera, and make it more universal. The technical term is universal housing, meaning people with all kinds of levels of skills can use it. And we saw some great breakthroughs in terms of design, things like doors that can handle a wheelchair coming through, zero-step entrances from porches up to the house level, something more level that doesn't require, make it impossible for a person in a wheelchair to get in. Things like braces in restrooms that people can hold on to, cabinets of a certain level. You could go on and on, lighting in the floors of homes so people can get up at night and not fall down, which only makes things worse for them if they do fall down. So we've taken great strides. I'm proud of the architectural industry that has adopted these kinds of changes, of the engineering and design people who've come up with all kinds of technologies, including things that make it possible for people with oxygen tanks to breathe, for example. And all of these things are essential in the society, and I would argue will be more essential going forward, because we're more aware of and more attentive to the disabilities caused by, for example, the environment itself. Disabilities may be from birth, they may be from an accident, they may be from aging, and unfortunately there are environmental disabilities now that trigger some sort of respiratory problems or other things. So we're just a better society when we make it possible for disabled people to be integrated into our society. It's just a great breakthrough. It's one of the best instincts for inclusion and successful that I have seen in American society.
And do you believe that the passage of the American with Disabilities Act in July 1990 is primarily what prompted some of these changes, or did you see that happening even prior to that?
Oh, it's been happening for, I would say, the last 40 years or more, maybe 50 years, that we've seen all these breakthroughs. I remember breakthroughs in the 1960s and 70s, where for the first time things were being required. And this was bipartisan. It was Republican administrations like President Nixon's, and of course Democratic administrations that followed, President Carter's years, President Clinton's years. So again, bipartisan, conservatives and liberals understood and set in motion requirements for the housing sector, and particularly public housing. And when I say public housing, I don't just mean public housing units, but anything that has public subsidy, whether it's low-income housing tax credits or other strategies.
So obviously I run a housing organization, and there's many people out there who obviously have concern about needs. I mean, what do you believe we should focus on in terms of advocacy to really continue to move the needle in the right direction relative to really addressing the needs of those with disabilities?
Well, I think we've come a long way, and I think we can see it physically in community. Sometimes we take it for granted. Practical little things like the way you turn a knob versus a handle to open doors or open cabinets. But I think the principal thing now, I think we're going to continue to innovate, because the technology now is involved. And there's all kinds of technologies related to computers and AI and such that are pro-disability. They level the playing field. Okay, so we're going to continue to see innovations. We don't stop the march, the forward march of progress. But what's also important is that we don't allow regression. We don't allow the progress that we've made to be set back. As somebody in the building industry says, this is too expensive. If you want to do affordable housing, we can't incorporate this. Well, we're just going to have to figure out how to incorporate it, because we cannot go backward and return to a day when people with disabilities just have less opportunity and less opportunity to enjoy life and work and be successful and live long and have family and all the other things that we want for everyone.
I'm glad you mentioned technology, because obviously in Austin we're in the hotbed of technology, and I think it'd be great if folks were really focused primarily on thinking about how we can accommodate needs and really retrofit situations and areas that would allow for.
Well, I'll tell you what I think is interesting, and that is, as the population ages, it creates a market, and technology and design and housing and furniture and a lot of other automotive are going to learn that there's a very substantial market among older people. And older people frequently have some of the same attributes in terms of disabilities as persons with full disabilities. So I think we're going in a direction where the market will recognize these are useful and important. There's a concept that a fella in Florida came up with called the lifelong home. And basically his theory is you incorporate into a home from the beginning things that people are going to need over an entire lifetime, like the bracing in the wall for bars that can be used in the restroom later in life, elderly or disability, but they're also useful to children early in life. So if you put them into the house originally, instead of having to come back and retrofit later, that's better for the society. So though people kick back sometimes when requirements are put in place, they tend to not only help people in meaningful ways, but they also end up adding to the value of the house for a lifetime.
So a policy question, do you believe like the local governments should have more of a role in trying to encourage more accessibility?
No question about it. I think local governments need to have some people designated to monitor that process, make sure it's meaningful at the local level, for a couple of reasons. One, most everything we do in society is local. It's place-based. So people pontificating from Washington, passing budgets and making speeches doesn't reach people unless it's happening at the local level. That is to say, in local governments, cities, counties, school districts, but also in local businesses. So just getting it down to the level where it's operative is very important. And the other is Washington, for reasons of fiscal problems, is withdrawing from a lot of areas and defining the responsibility downward. So that's another thing that we're going to have to work with over the next few years. So yes, I do see local governments, and I would say a couple of things. One, I think it's very important that local governments set up the capacity. So an office or an adjunct to a housing function or a neighborhood function, or in the city manager's office or in the mayor's office, those kinds, that level of attentiveness is important, but it's also important to train people in this field. This is now becoming a legitimate field in the building arts, in the building construction trades, in architecture, in design, et cetera. And I think that's important.
Yeah, and I do see the role of, housing agencies like mine really trying to work on advocating for such. And so I know we need to all collectively work on this together and try to encourage and really push our political leadership to
I
do
think
such.
we've come a long way. I really do. And it's sort of popular these days to just decry all the ways in which the society is not working or government is not working. But this is an area where I think what the government initiated and people like Justin Dart advocated for and spread it widely across race, across age, across gender issues, etc., okay, has made the society better and made people aware. So people who were unaware before now are aware. People who were closed to people with disabilities now get it, that they have value. And you take examples of the technology. I mean, who would have imagined motorized wheelchairs would have the ubiquity that they do now? Who would imagine that we go a step further and find a way to retrofit a van so that a wheelchair can be used and people can go where they need to go. So those are just examples of how the technology has evolved to allow us to do things that were unthinkable before. People can use computers because people have recognized that people with disabilities might need some adaptation to a keyboard or to the computer device. So I think we've become more sensitive as a society. We've become more accepting as a society. And even people who think of themselves as tough, hard-edged, don't cut anybody any slack, I think they understand we gain when we include persons with disabilities, regardless of their other characteristics.
Well, this has been great. I mean, I really appreciate the fact that you talk about disabilities in the spirit of inclusion and thinking about all segments of the population. I think that's great. And I think that what you talked about as far as the awareness piece was particularly resonated with me, because I think that folks don't realize that it affects all segments of the population, even in areas we don't think about traditionally.
Well, I think we're going to be seeing more need, not less. And one classical area, for example, that makes me believe that is the aging of the population. We have a baby boomer population that reached 65. The first edge of the baby boomers. The baby boomers were born in 1946 to 64. Those that were born in 1946 reached 65 years of age in about 2011. And then for 18 years thereafter, 46 to 64, 1946, 1964. For 18 years thereafter, people are going to be entering their 65th year. The ones at the top are going to be 85, right? That's one of the fastest growing populations in America. Why? Because our longevity is increasing. Because people who used to die from diseases that are now eradicated, like polio and tuberculosis, are living. People who used to die because they smoked cigarettes haven't smoked in a few years, been aware of the dangers of that. People who died from heart attacks have been following better diets, and they're living longer. But the human body can't live forever, and so it starts to break down, and people have trouble with their knees, and people have trouble walking, and people have trouble with the strength of their arms and other things that resemble disabilities. They actually are disabilities after a point in time. That population is growing dramatically. And then of course the ages that come behind that may even live even longer because of things that we do with the stem cell or things that we do with genetic work. So I think this subject of universal housing for the lifelong person is just beginning. It's just rising as a field of work and as a field of governmental attention.
Thank you. Well, again, this has been great. I think I'm even more enlightened when I think about the future and what that really means in this industry and how it's going to continue to emerge. So it's really important that we talk about this during this month and throughout the year and years to come. Thanks so much. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.